Okay,
recording.
So I am recording, so that's good. What, just a reminder, I think last week when we did the switching off of video and the muting thing, I think that helped with broadband. So not just yet, but when we get started, I'd suggest that we do that. Certainly the video more than anything else. As much as I love to see you all, because I like to see the reaction, I think it does make life a little bit easier. Now, so we'll do that. We're going to, tonight we're going to, John, towards the end, we'll do a little bit of Photoshop work, a bit of live Photoshop work again to do with sharpening. So hopefully we'll have time for that. Our main event tonight is Puffin Mania, of course. Puffin fever, something that sets in when we go on some of our puffin trips. Now, I thank you to everybody who has sent in some images, and it's really good because what I've been able to do tonight is put a bit of a presentation together, pretty much 98% with just your images. So I haven't had to use any of my images, which is really nice. So we're going to bring those up. I won't get everybody whose image it comes up to say something about it or whatever, because that will just take us too long to go through the whole thing. But now and again, I might ask somebody who's got a picture up to come on. So so pay attention, and obviously if you have muted yourself, remember to unmute yourself and then speak. So shall we just all switch off our videos and we will try. I've just got to get up. I'm just going to screen share, and then I need to get the desktop share, and then I've got to get the slideshow open. Where did I put it? I can't see because the thing's in the way. There it is. Right. Okay. Can we see that?
Yes.
You can. Brilliant. Okay.
Yep.
Right. All good. Right. As usual, I've got something sitting right. I've got that blinking thing. Hold on. Let me just take that down again. I've just got to move.
It's the Zoom controls.
It's the Zoom controls out. I'm going to move. I've got two screens set up tonight, so I'm setting it on the other screen. So that might help actually, if that works. Okay. All right, guys. We are ready to go. So, okay. Yes. As I said, right now we'd probably all be thinking about getting kind of set, maybe heading up north to the Farne Islands to do what sort of quite annual, but almost annual pilgrimage up there as a big Photo Bars trip, something that I've enjoyed massively doing. And John came with us last time for the first time. Is that right, John?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, had a great time.
Yeah, lots of you come up pretty much every time we've done that, and it's always a good thing to do. But of course, this year it might not be impossible for some of you go individually as things hopefully start to relax. But obviously, I think it's going to be too late to do any organised trip or anything up there if stuff relaxes, even if that opportunity does arise. So I just thought it would be nice to get us in the mood, remind us what we're missing, and think about doing this for sure next year. So that's what this is all about. But I thought a nice way to start would be to talk about some top puffin facts rather than dive straight into images. And I'm not going to pretend that I knew every single one of these facts, because I'm afraid I'm definitely not, and you all know this, not that clever. So a little bit of Googling with the help from the WWF, I've come up with a few facts that are quite interesting. I think they are anyway. And this one I did know, and I'm pretty sure some of you bright sparks out there would know. And the fact that puffin only have those bright bills. I'm talking about the Atlantic puffin. That's the one that we photograph in the Farnes, and generally, obviously, the other places that you go to around the UK. Puffin only have this bright bills during the mating season. Okay, so I'm guessing it's there to kind of to attract a mate and do all that kind of thing. Somebody. Whoever that is making quite a bit of noise on there, can they mute their microphone, because I'm getting a lot of feedback. Sorry. Thank you. So that's kind of puffin fact number one. Puffin fact number two is that the fact they only lay a single egg each year, and that's normally with the same partner, but it isn't exclusively necessarily with the same partner. There can be some acts of adultery or switching partners that can go on with puffins, but as a general rule, they're pretty reliable partners, you know, just like we all are. Anyway, Number 3 is and I love this fact, and I didn't know this actually. I love the fact that they are silent when they're at sea, but obviously we know they're not when they're breeding because we hear them. We hear them when we're out photographing them. So the fact they're silent, I'm guessing this is because generally when they're away at sea, what's the point in talking? There's nothing there. It's a bit like, what did you say earlier, John, when I
In
mentioned
space, no one can hear you scream.
Yes, exactly. I think there's an element of that, but I think that's a nice little fact there. This is fascinating. An adult puffin weighs about the same as a can of Coke. It's really not much, is it? They're really incredibly lightweight. And if any of you haven't been to photograph puffin, and hopefully John and I can take you at some point to do it, they're much smaller than you imagine. I think a lot of people often think that they are bigger in real life than they actually are. And I know on people that have come with me and seen puffin for the first time, that's been one of the things. Oh, they're smaller than I imagined.
Yeah,
I think
there's often that thing. Where are the adult puffins? Yeah, because
Yes.
there's this idea they're all the kids there, but
Exactly. But no, they're quite tiny. Tiny, but quite small. Okay, this is from a photographic point of view. This is something that we know because it makes it harder to photograph them. They can fly at up to 55 miles per hour. Okay, that's pretty fast, isn't it? And I know that when we're out there trying to get pictures of them in flight, that can be something that can be quite frustrating. And the other thing, I like this. I don't know how anybody's worked this out with a tape measure or something on a mast, but they like to cruise about 30 feet above the sea. Apparently, when they're flying, obviously they will go higher than that, particularly if they're coming up on cliffs and stuff. But there you go. So if you see something flying at you at sea at about 30 feet, chances are it's a puffin. Okay. This one I knew, I kind of didn't know this, but I knew Iceland obviously had a lot of puffin breeding, but about 60% of the world's puffin population breed in Iceland. Which I think is pretty interesting, and ironically, it's about one of the few places I've not photographed puffin in Iceland. Although I have photographed puffin at a small, tiny island between Greenland and Iceland. So I'm sort of almost counting it. Not that I got any good pictures on that particular occasion because the weather was appalling. But anyway, so there you go. Iceland is the world breeding capital for puffin. Now, as we know, again, from a photographic point of view, they can hold lots of fish, often sand eel, their favorite food, in their beaks. And that's thanks to their very raspy tongue and their spiny palate. So if you're wondering how they manage to catch, because they can hold up to 12, 13, 14, even sometimes I think I've counted 15 different kind of bits of fish dangling out from their beaks. If you wondered how they're doing it, it's almost like a comb, I guess, isn't it? So that they're kind of the serration is holding onto that food, so that they can then bring that back and feed it to their young. So that's how they're managing to do that. Now there are 4 puffin species. Now, as I said earlier, it's the Atlantic that we know well. There's also the horned, and the Atlantic and the horned are quite similar. They look quite similar. There's also a tufted puffin, and thanks to Naomi, we're going to see one of those. I actually thought when I first saw it, it might have been the rhinoceros auklet, because I'm like, what is this? I wasn't sure what it was, and I kind of did a bit of it. I thought, well, it might be that, but it doesn't have, because the rhinoceros auklet are called rhinoceros because in the breeding season they have little kind of feather growth that grows up, and it kind of looks a little bit like a horn. So looks like a horn. So that's why that's so named. But anyway, we're going to see one of those, which makes it quite interesting, I think. So that's our little puffin. A puffin facts, which I thought was a nice way to start tonight. And I've sent this in by I think it was Sean Burke sent this in. Pretty sure it was. Just sort of one of our past puffin gatherings, which made me smile. And I thought for some of you that'll bring back a few memories. I could see a few people in there. I think that's Chris at the back. I think you see Naomi. There's 1 or 2 others hidden around in there. Some of those people are not photo buzzers. I think what happened or happens often when we get there, we all get into the right position, or we can find the best position for the birds landing, depending on the wind. So we can kind of make a little photo buzz gathering, or swarm, I guess would be the more appropriate way of saying it. And then we get other people come along long ago, because they obviously know what they're doing. They're all standing there, so it's a bit like our magnetic personalities dragging them in.
It's how to attract other photographers, isn't it? You just point 3 lenses in one direction, and if there's another photographer, it would be like a magnet. You will just draw them in and make them point in the same direction, even if there's nothing there.
I think we should have blow-up decoys. So we just put them in a whole bunch, so everybody flocks over there, and then we get all the best area without having anybody else getting in our way. Anyway, and this is obviously, it looks like we're all kind of really into it here. We all got cameras to our eye. But there's one more shot that you want to look at. Looks like this is clearly the after a bit of a fly-through, and everybody's looking to see whether they've nailed it there. Jane Goff looking, oh, did I get that? Not sure. So Chris is doing exactly the same. I have no idea what Nell. I don't think Nell's with us tonight, is she? But Nell, what do you think your theory here is why Nell's got that expression on her face, John?
I think it's because she whenever someone gets a camera out and takes a picture of her, she always knows, and she always looks at the camera and puts a cheeky grin on there. But is that Simon there looking at Nell's hat? Or is he looking at his camera? I think he's probably investigating. Yes.
Who knows? Okay. All right. Now, we're going to get into some pictures in a minute. And I think that earlier this week, for those of you that go on to the lounge, I know there was a little bit of a scare earlier this week. And that scare was around the fact that Paul Barrow couldn't find his puffin shots, and was obviously very despondent by this fact. Of course, everybody was very comforting, very sympathetic to that, and nobody took the mickey out of him whatsoever. However, thanks to Barry Carter, who sent this picture in to me, who managed to find where Paul's puffins were actually hiding. That's apparently where they were all along. So all is good, really. John, you're the photo shopper. What do you think of Barry's photoshopping skills here?
Well, I recognise the Atlantic puffin species, but I don't know. I also recognise the tilly hat, but I don't know what that thing is underneath the tilly hat. I'm not quite sure if I can identify that. But it's some pretty good Photoshop work there. There might be a hint of a cutout, but I don't think it's on the puffin. I think it's on Paul Barrow. I think that's where the Photoshop work's gone on.
Maybe. I'd imagine that the puffin started life as a tern, probably, didn't it? And then
I would have thought so.
So thank you, Mary. Very amusing. I'm sure Paul. I can't see Paul other than his name, but I'm sure he's inwardly laughing, really. But the good news is that Paul did, in fact, find.
Too damn right, I did.
Thank you, Paul. So Paul did find his puffin pictures eventually, as this next image shows, because this is our first proper puffin picture from you guys. And what we've got here is very typical of the kind of behaviour that we see when we're on the farms, when the puffin are coming in with their beaks full of sand eel. And that is the marauding gulls. The black-headed gulls are absolutely going for them and trying to steal, the puffins going off, doing all the hard work, diving under the water, catching the eels, trapping them on that nice, that spiky pallet that they have, and then coming back to feed their young, and then the blinking gulls are trying to nick it. And Paul's gone for it. So there's a lot of energy and energetic, a bit of a pan here, I think is probably the best way to describe it. So he's kind of caught a really good behavioural moment, I think.
Yeah, I really like this shot because there's, as you say, the word energy really applies to it. There's so much going on, and there's a real narrative with these gulls are clearly after something, but that speed of the puffin, though they're quite ungainly to a degree, they are so fast. And you know who's going to win the race here and who's going to keep hold of their sand eels.
Yeah, well, not always. Quite often you'll see the gulls getting the blinking things. But anyway, yeah, all good. So thank you for that, Paul. That's good. Next up, we have a bird in flight shot from Howard. John, do you want to kick off on this one?
Yeah, I love this shot. This is fantastic because you've got the gob full of sand eels, which is always classic for a puffin. And though we've got quite a bland blue sky, there's nothing that the Howard could do about that at the time. We've got a great focus and it's a great shape. Anyone who's tried to shoot puffins in flight will know that you get those kind of the wings up shot, or more commonly, you get the wings down when it's gone through the flap and the wings are down, and they don't look so elegant in that. Yeah. But this is a perfect. It's either gliding just before it starts to come into land. So it's the glide, then there's the brakes on, or it's actually been caught mid flap at a very fast shutter speed. But either way, it's got that wonderful symmetry to it, and I really like this shot. And even that kink in the wingtips, it's a beautiful picture. That's well done, Howard. Yeah, really well timed.
But I think just an interest, just a thing to think ahead. Well, what again for those of you who haven't photographed puffins in flight or haven't really done much bird photography in flight, it's not easy to get a really pin sharp shot of these birds or any bird. Puffins, as we said, are relatively small and they're pretty fast flyers. Those wings, although they are designed for diving and for going underwater and catching the fish, they do power them. They really pump those wings, do power them pretty quick, and 55 miles per hour, if I remember correctly, at 30 feet cruising height. There you go. So, you know, it's not an easy thing to do. Now, this week, actually, I've been writing, I thought I'd kind of do a new birds in flight article for PhotoBuzz, kind of back to the basics with it, really. And I started it, I was kind of going to do one kind of main one, but for Friday upload, and I've now done one, but I'm going to do it as almost as a part work. It's probably going to be a 2-part, maybe a 3-part. So, and this week I'm just concentrating on shutter speed and why that is so relevant to bird in flight shots. So look out for that on Friday. John's already subbed it. We're so organised, John, this week. I can't believe it.
Yes, I've been through it. There's lots of really good tips within that, and it's the kind of thing. Even though you know you can't go and shoot puffins at the moment because of the lockdown stuff, but if you can go on your leisurely walk when you pop out, if there's a duck pond nearby, you can put all those things into practice just with ducks coming in to land on the water and that kind of thing. So there's lots of tips within the article that you can put into practice immediately. So that should be good.
Absolutely, except for Howard, he doesn't need to. He's got
well, clearly not. No,
clearly. So all is good, really. So that's great. So that's a really nice shot there from Howard, and we'll move on to the next one, which is a shot. This is a very different. It's not a bird in flight. This is one of Pauline's shot here of. We've got 3 birds. Which 3 birds is a kind of a. I've seen it written as a sort of the magic photographic number. You know, I don't worry about how many, you know, it's like, does it work compositionally with however many animals or birds I have in the shot, but 3 often works quite well. And when John and I were looking at this earlier, as we quickly ran through the images together, one of the things that kind of we talked about is this kind of, the way it's framed, it kind of set up. Paulie's got an upside down triangle here, if you think about it, with the 3rd outer focus bird behind. Now, a triangle composition, whether it's upside down or normal, is quite a powerful way to compose stuff. Now, if you remember the article, I think it was last week, I can't remember, the one with the seal and the white background. When I was talking about that illustrative style that I was trying to do there after my conversations with my friend Richard Simmons, who's a wildlife artist. He uses triangular composition a lot, and I hadn't realised how much I use it in my pictures until he started pointing it out to me. It wasn't something that was there on my, you know, like the rule of thirds is, but a triangular composition can be quite a powerful way to arrange the elements within your scene.
Yeah, and one of the other things is the rule of odds, which is where you don't have an even number of items of subjects within your frame, and if you go for 1, 3, 5, 7, or whatever it may be, probably stopping at 5 to be honest, because you'll always get something that will dominate, something that will be central to the picture if you've got sort of an odd number. Whereas if you have an even number, you get almost a divide down the middle, and that's called the rule of odds in the sort of the rules of thumb that make up ideas about composition. But this one's really interesting because your eye is naturally drawn. I mean, some of you may disagree, but I think your eye is naturally drawn to the puffin on the left, simply because over in the West, we read from left to right. So you automatically go there to the left-hand puffin, then you move across to the right-hand puffin because that's how you scan pages. And then you're brought down to the puffin in the center afterwards. And that almost holds court, even though it's out of focus and it's in the background. The quirkiness of that composition, actually, that's where your eye rests on that 3rd puffin in the middle, because it's central to the image. So it's working with that triangle and the rule of odds to do that. I think this is a lovely shot from Pauline, because clearly there's something attracted their attention. There's been a squawk or something over to their left or our right, and they're all looking in the same direction. And it's that classic puffin portrait, but 3 of them in one go, with that quirky, slightly defocused one at the back holding the fort there. So I think it's what you call a well-seen moment that's been nicely captured. So well done.
They've probably just seen Paul Barrow with a puffin on his head.
Could be.
Okay. All right. Moving on. Well, yes. Well, nice one, Pauline. Thank you for sending that to us. Next one. Right. Okay. I love this shot. This is from Barry. Barry Carter, just to prove he's not just photoshopping puffins onto Paul's head. I like this shot, and I like it because it's different. I like it because it's quirky, and I like it because, again, talking about that still image and white backgrounds. I was using snow, but on this occasion, and I remember this this trip that we had, we didn't have the best light. We had flat skies overhead, but Barry hasn't worried about that. He's used the white to his advantage, and his composition here with the puffin right over on this right hand side with an interesting crop on it, and then using that strip of land in the background to kind of give it some depth to the image and a little bit of context. I think it works really, really well. Yeah, I kind of like it's not a shot that I don't think I would have taken the shot. It's not quite to the style that I would shoot. And for that reason, I like it even more, because I love it when I see a composition that I wouldn't have thought of and that's really successful. So I think it's cool.
Yeah, I think this is great. I mean, we've all been inundated, I'm sure, on Facebook and things with the 10 albums, no explanation, blah, blah, blah. I really think if this puffin could sing, this would be its CD cover, because it's got that great composition. And the way it's positioned, it just shows that if you have a bland white sky and an overcast day, a lot of people say, oh, you can't take decent shots in those conditions. Oh, yes, you can. And here's Barry showing you how you can make use of that white space. I think it's a really powerful composition, a lovely picture.
Can I add something?
Yes, Barry. Yeah. We've got 2 more of your images to look at yet, though. Do you want to wait, or do you want to jump in?
Just a very quick one.
Go for it.
I entered it for Bird Photographer of the Year. And Rob Reed, who runs Bird Photographer of the Year.
Yeah.
I put an added note to him and said, this will make a really good book cover. I never heard a thing.
No, well, that's often the way with these things. I mean, I think competitions are something we could do an entire night on, and all the rest of it. But the thing is, Barry, I think a shot like this will divide opinion.
Yes.
And I don't know you. I know you're a camera club member. I don't know whether a camera club judge, for example, would like this. They talk about it being too far over to the right, too much white space, whatever. And while everybody has an opinion, and an opinion is valid for anyone. I think it's good to break the rules. It's good to try and do different stuff, and it's good to take that risk, take a chance. Often, that's how you can really sometimes come up with something a bit unique.
Yeah, and if bird watching, in terms of editorial photography, if Bird Watching or another magazine were doing a puffin special, I think this could get the opening spread, because you've got room for the headline and the copy and all the rest of it, and it would sit perfectly. You wouldn't have to do anything with it to make a great magazine spread out of that shot.
Well,
so I like it.
Because we're going to look at something about that right at the end, aren't we? But anyway, we'll come back to that. Let's move on. There's another shot from Barry, all taken on the same trip. I'm assuming from the conditions. John, do you want to pick this one? I remember Barry taking this shot, and I remember Barry delightedly walking around with his LCD, showing it to everybody and me, quite rightly, because it was a top shot then, and it's a top shot now.
It's brilliant. It's a great shot. The thing this reminds me of, you get in sort of, cycling, mountain biking magazines and such like, when they do a jump and they twist the front wheel a bit and just cock their head towards the camera with that "look at me" kind of expression. Yeah. That's what this is, but with a puffin who clearly isn't on a mountain bike. But
Barry could Photoshop one in. He's shown us his Photoshop skills already tonight.
If you can shop in a Barrow, you can do a mountain bike underneath, chuck in a Specialized rock hopper or something, and just lose the inelegant feet of the puffin. Though you want to get rid of those first. But
leave the puffin's feet alone. I like the puffin's feet.
I think it's a fantastic shot. It's got everything. We've got the flight, we've got the motion, we've got the energy. Beautifully composed, nice square format as well. And there's everything there, ticking all the boxes. And again, you haven't got that sort of wonderful blue sky. You've got the bleached whiteout sky, which is, traditionally bad conditions for bird photography, but actually works really well because it just isolates that puffin perfectly.
Well, it pushes all it gives you more of a chance to enjoy the detail. isn't it? And that's
Yeah.
what I was saying in that article with the seal. It's about detail. You know, there's no other detail there to distract you. So you've got, you know, that's what you want to look at. So, you know, I just think it's a really good reminder that, you know, sometimes we'd go out and we'll go, oh, I can't do it today. The sky's flat white and I wanted to do this. It's not always the case. Just embrace it and see what you can come up with.
Yeah, flat white isn't a problem for portrait photographers in studios. So think of it in the same way.
Yeah, it's different, but you know, there you go. Okay, one last one for Barry. Obviously, I've added the captions. I was putting your names on everything, and then I kind of thought, well, let's call the puffin on the left Barry, and then the puffin on the right Barry's mate. I mean, this is Barry's using the same treatment, and he's gone for this is the wall around the little lighthouse thing, top left-hand corner of Inner Farm, and they often sit on there resting, before they try and get to the burrows and get to the marauding gulls or what have you. And he's just caught a nice moment of these two kind of facing each other that works really well. And again, it's that cleanness gives us that opportunity to have a look at the absolute detail. And one of the things I really like is the slight ruffling of the feathers of the puffin, Barry puffin, as opposed to Barry's best mate puffin, which is, I can imagine, having been there, that's the wind ruffling through those feathers on the high area of the island.
No, I don't think it is the wind, actually. I think that's because it's the Barry puffin. I think it's because it's a bit northern, a bit rough around the edges. That's probably what's causing it.
Right. It's flown through a hedge backwards.
That's right.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, no, great, really nice trio, Barry. I kind of wanted to show all three of those because I think as a collection, they work really strongly. Next shot up is Sandy. It's very similar, actually. John, do you want to pick up on this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great use of the feature there. I mean, it's on the Inner Farm with the wall there, the white wall, and it almost looks like a glacier or something like that. And again, we've got we've got some directional light here. We can see a bit of backlighting going on, but we have a bland backdrop, but it just adds to the detail of the bird. We've got some backlighting coming through. And this is kind of what you might call the classic puffin portrait, that classic composition where it's just nicely on the third, really nicely balanced and positioned. It's a beautiful shot that is the kind of thing you'll find in magazine features left, right, and center. It's a great picture.
Yeah, no, it is great. I mean, there's a different white balance. The one that Barry was showing, we've got a little bit more of a bluer tinge to the sky. I think it was probably a different session up on the islands up there from Sandy. But yeah, no, it does. I mean, it's just a simple but effective portrait. With the space on the left, it works really, really nicely. Okay, next one up is Christine. Okay, so we got a kind of a backlit show off. Ta-da! I'm here, kind of puffin. A little bit. I don't know, Chris. I was going to ask you whether you should maybe check. Is Chris with us? I hope she is. The highlights on this, although it is backlit and you want some highlights, the flower highlights are a bit too bright for my eye, and I'm just wondering whether your computer screen is darker and they're not showing so bright on your computer screen. I don't know, but it's just worth something that's worth checking for you.
I'll have a look.
Yeah, do because both your images are slightly bright. Mine's a calibrated screen here, so it's worth looking at that. But that apart, great kind of arms out, almost like the angel of the north type of kind of pose there, as it's in amongst I'm guessing it's thinking about going down its burrow and has just landed, and the backlighting that works so effectively. We'll see some other backlighting ones in a bit, and so I really, really like the shot. So I think if John, you can kind of jump in on this. If there's some detail in the highlights, just you could probably just tone it back a fraction, don't you think?
Yeah, I don't think there possibly won't be detail restored to the flowers, the highlight flowers, but I think pulling the highlights down might bring you a little bit back. So if your highlights are at say 50% in the raw conversion, take them down to -100, and that may help it a little bit. But what I love is it's quite an unusual picture, this one, because you've got the wings up, but the puffin's grounded, going for its burrow. And you don't see so many of those. We see lots of the classic portrait style ones and lots of sort of birds in flight. But this is a grounded puffin. You've got the perfect symmetry of the angel wings. I think it's a lovely moment. And I think that's one of the wonderful things is that Christine's taken the time to actually, you have to hang around to get these kind of moments. So to go for the grounded puffins and get a shot of those, you end up with something that's behaviorally a bit more unusual and a bit less common.
Yeah.
So I like it. Some lovely
Yeah.
shapes going on there.
Talking of more unusual or kind of a portfolio of different types of shot, because if I'm honest, I often get slightly obsessed with the flight shots. I always tell myself every time I go, I'm not going to get obsessed, but I do. But if you get only obsessed with flight shots, what you miss out on is shots like that. Plus this next one, John, if you just want to pick up on this one.
Now, this is a puffin in its burrow. And what I find fascinating about this shot from Christine is the fact that if you think of most puffin shots you see, you've got kind of like jet black shark eyes. You don't see any, not even a highlight. There's no catch lights coming back to give the eyes a bit more character and depth. But we can actually see iris and pupil in this one. So it suddenly gives a different feel and a character to the bird. It's almost like an albino puffin or something. So I think that's what's really interesting. You've got the nice shape, you've got the natural framing of the foliage, and then going into the puffin and the burrow itself working as a frame. But there's kind of lots of layers going on here. But right in the center, you've got the detail in the eye, which is a rare thing to see in puffins. So I think maybe take those highlights down again just a fraction, because we're losing a little bit of detail there. But yeah, I think it's really nice, and to see that detail is great. That's what's special about it for me.
Yeah, no, it's great. And Christine, if you could just switch your, if you could unmute yourself for a moment, because Christine also sent me several images, these next images. There's a couple I've missed out, but kind of, and I just want her to explain where and how she came to take these. Obviously, conservation, puffin conservation is very important. Puffin are, fewer numbers. So of course they are, the wardens are kind of checking on them, weighing them, doing all this kind of stuff. So Chris, just a little, can you tell us a background to these?
Yeah, I think this is the second island. So what's that? Staple Island. And as we got off the boat, there was a notice saying that they were going to be doing some bird ringing. So it seemed like an ideal opportunity to get up a bit closer to some pufflings. And so we hung around for it. So the first one at the top left there is the guy reaching down into the burrow and hoping, keeping everything crossed, that there's only the puffling in there and not the adult bird, because otherwise it's going to get fairly bitten. Yeah. But luckily he just pulled out the one puffling. As you can see on the right there, he's the ruler thing that he's got in his hand. He's actually measuring the wing length, which is a common thing that they do, to just see how healthy the birds are. One of the other images I sent to AJ was they were using something to measure the size of the head as well.
Yeah.
And then they pop them upside down into this orange juice container.
A little bit inelegant, I thought that, looking at it. I was like, oh, okay. But then I guess they used to being stuffed down a burrow, so,
Absolutely. Well, they pop them upside down because then the beaks are not coming up at them trying to actually have a go at them. And also the
darkness will make them less, they'll go actually a bit calmer that way as well.
Yeah, I suspect so. And so that they then weigh them. The first thing they do when they pull them out is actually put the ring on. And you can see on the top of the toolbox there, the little green things and the pliers that they use to put the ring on as well. Cool. So having done all that and just checked the general health of the bird, they then put it back in the burrow, ready for when mum comes back with food to feed it.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. I just thought it was really interesting to see. So I thought that was a nice little inclusion, not rather than just looking at the great images you guys are shooting, but also some of the work that goes on. I think that's, so important. Sometimes we can forget about that. Sorry, I think we just need to move on, Chris, if that's all right, because we're just keeping an eye on time, that's all. So but maybe put it on the lounge a bit later, whatever.
No, reply in chat. It's fine.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so next up is a shot here from Rob. John, do you want to pick up on this one?
Yeah, natural framing, and it's a lovely shot, isn't it? And there's all the detail, even in the white of the puffin's plumage, that you can still see all that detail there. Once again, we've got those black eyes. You see, there's no catch lights in the eyes. They really do absorb light, puffin eyes. But there's a lovely expression, great detail on the bill. And I just like the way that Rob's used the defocused foliage in the foreground to frame the bird. So it's a nice picture, really nice.
It's kind of like that peeking through kind of thing. It feels quite intimate, doesn't it? Which is nice. Which the next shot does as well. This is Sean's shot again. I'm guessing that I think that's down a burrow again. Looking at the dirt and stuff on the on the fish. That's almost certain. I reckon that's probably not its own burrow. I reckon it's taken refuge down a burrow to hide from those blinking, marauding gulls, and it's waiting for a chance to head back out. And what I really like about Sean's, again, little intimate sort of I don't know, gaze into this moment is the grittiness of it. We're really getting the grittiness and on the beak and on the birds, all the bits that it's picked up. That's what really makes it for me.
Yeah, it's fantastically detailed, isn't it, the shot? And there's that natural vignette which draws you in towards that detail on the fish, where the big highlight point, if you kind of do a squint and close one eye, you can see the big highlight point there on the reflections on the fish. So that's the bit that draws the light attention, and everything kind of fans out from there. But it's a lovely shot, really, really detailed and kind of fiercely concentrated as a picture. So it's good.
Okay, so next one up is a shot from Phil, who's gone for a sort of a circle of socially distancing puffin, and one looking like it's landing in the middle. And actually, I think it's quite, it's kind of a bit different to everything else that we've seen again tonight.
It's like a ritual at Castlerig or Avebury or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's cool. No, it's really good. We're going to move on reasonably quickly now, because I'm just conscious of time and not wanting to keep everybody all night, and we've still got John's bit to do. And I really would like John to do his sharpening bit. I think it's useful for everybody to see that stuff. But no, I think that's a really, really nice shot. And also, very quickly from Phil, also sent this one in to us. Phil, a bit of promotion for Photopass, but he's using the old logo. We don't use this logo anymore. Come on. I don't. What is it with you lot and photoshopping mad things? Anyway, we love it. Very good. Very funny. Okay, and I had to use this one. This is the last of the Farne Island images that I sent. I hope I got everybody's. I've got some other images coming up from other places. But I again remember Tom getting this shot at the time, and I loved it then, and I've loved it since. It's just a wow shot moment, beautifully captured. Really difficult to get it frozen like that, to get it sharp as he's done, and to capture it. It's a terrific. It really is a terrific shot.
It's fantastic. Yeah, can't praise that enough. It's a wonderful moment, and you got the narrative, the confrontation going on there. I don't know who's going to win, but you can see the puffin kind of breaks on, rearing up, just getting ready to fight off the gull attack. So that's a beautiful picture. Really well done.
It's cool. Okay, and moving right. Okay, so next shot, and we were talking about puffin species earlier. This is one from Naomi, which is like, oh, okay, what's that? Naomi, can you switch on your mic and just tell us, because this is you are on. That's it. I can hear you. Just tell us where this is a captive bird. Yeah. Where did you shoot it?
In the Living Coast Centre in Torquay.
Yep.
And I've forgotten what type of puffin it is.
Tufted, I think.
Tufted puffin.
Yes, fascinating, isn't it? Very, very, very different to the Atlantic puffin. So there's no mistaking that it's very much a different puffin, but that beak is still so similar, isn't it?
Yeah, but he gets colourful in the summer.
Yeah, this is his non-summer colours, isn't it?
Dark phase.
Yeah, his dark phase. We all have a dark phase at times, don't we? There we go. Okay, thanks, Naomi. I just thought it was really interesting to have that as in the mix tonight. I thought that was great. Naomi's next image was this one. I remember her putting this onto Photobuzz, and we all loved it then, and I still love it now. Really difficult to get that shot, I think, I'm guessing from a Zodiac or a small boat. Having kind of tried to do similar, they tend to kind of shift away from you a little bit. So she's done a great job, and it's that skipping stone effect that she's got with the taking off puffin. I like this, John. What do you think?
Yeah, it's lovely. I mean, it tells the whole story of motion, doesn't it? And you've got the wonderful texture of the splashes where it's landed, and they're still hanging. It shows the speed of it as well. So yeah, it's a beautiful shot. I really like it, and nice lighting as well. Nice bit of direct sun coming across to cut it out. But elegant shapes, fantastic story being told within one frame. Yeah, well done.
Absolutely. Okay, so a little series just coming up quickly we're just going to run through them. Then I'm going to ask her if I think this is you, Rosie. So if you just for a minute switch on, I'm going to ask you in a minute. I'm going to just run through your shots. There's one here. We've got another one here, which is a great portrait, and then another one there. Now these aren't obviously on the Farne Islands. I think I know where they are, but Rosie, do you want to just give us a very, very quick background on these great shots? Rosie, are you there?
I am now there.
Okay. Can you speak up a little bit?
Sorry, taken on Skomer.
Yeah.
And yeah, what can I say? I love the backlighting
Yes.
always, and that's just what this one's about.
Absolutely. It's the backlighting that really makes that shot work, and then giving it that nice room within the frame as well, I think is excellent too. I think they're all terrific shots, and I think that one of the downsides of the Farne Islands is often you can't always be there, or you know, it's hard to be there at the best light. Whereas actually Skoma, where you can be, if you can get on there, you can be there, you know, when you've got great light like this. So I just think these are three really terrific images. Nice behavioural shot on the last one with the sea, with perfect, beautiful blue backdrop. Thanks, Rosie. I'm going to move on because of time. So, okay, right. Next up, we now skipped. This one's from Mary, a flying buzzer. Flying puffin on a photo buzzer trip, not to the Farne Islands. Thank you. Not to the Farne Islands.
When the puffins start shooting flying buzzers, we'll know something's gone wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. This was actually in the Faroe Islands, when I took a group to the Faroe Islands, to an island called Mykonos, which is an absolutely fantastic place to go. And we've got another shot coming up from Basil in a moment. It's a fantastic place to photograph puffins. And I actually started looking at a new trip to Faroes just before the blinking pandemic came, and kind of, so I've stopped doing that at the moment. But I would really like to take another group back there to do some landscape stuff and to go to this particular island. We were there at the time we were there, where they weren't feeding. They were doing they were obviously beginning to sort of line their nests, and that's why they were flying around a lot with bits of wool from the sheep and obviously grass and stuff like this. So terrific backdrops all around the ocean there, and you know, this is a good shot. And this one, the next one from Basil as well, is the same. It's another Faroe shot. And John, you made the comment earlier, and weirdly, Basil, I've literally almost got this exact pose. We must have been sat next to each other when we took it. When you took it, you kind of said it was 3D, didn't you, John? Almost.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's interesting with shots from this location out in the Faroes is you've got these very dark cliffs, the very dark background. And when you've got a little bit of subtle sort of backlighting or side lighting, it rim lights the bird and almost makes it look like a cutout. So it's got that kind of 3D appeal to it. So it looks like the bird's actually coming out of the picture, which is really cool.
Yeah, no, yeah, it is. I mean, the beauty of that particular island is you've got pretty much every background. You can have a green background, you can have a dark background, you can have a beautiful sea background, and you know, you can be, you know, really close to where the puffins are. It's incredibly windy when we were there. I remember we were nearly blown off the cliffs, but that also meant that the puffins were having to work really hard at flying. Hence this sort of a pose I think he's in. But it was fun, and somewhere definitely. If anyone is interested in the Faroe Islands, and let me know, because I will continue to look into that, or I'll get back to looking into that as soon as we've got the all clear, maybe for next year. That would be good. Next shot also from Basil, again, a really classic puffin beak open pose. You know, I like this, that green background, say a bit dark, a bit green, nice variegated background. I like variegated backgrounds when they're knocked out of focus like this, because it just gives that little bit of extra interest and contrast range within the shot.
Well, I think we're so used to seeing puffins against blue, whether it's blue sea or blue skies, or against the white skies. It's quite interesting when you can see a bit of kind of, you know, landscape behind them, which gives a different sense of context.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's good. And just we're literally at the end of these, which is good. So that's almost perfect timing for John's Photoshop demonstration. So that's good. Apologies if if we feel like we've rushed through a couple of them, but it's just try and keep it on track. I just added this one in. This is one of my shots from the Faroe Islands. Just a fairly simple portrait again of the puffin with a load of grass in its beak, and I photographed it this way because when I was looking, I thought the backdrop is really cool. Again, that variegated backdrop, got a bit of cliff out of focus behind, got lots of kind of nice out of focus green in front, etc. So that could make a really cool cover if I could sell it to one of the magazines as a cover. And so I shot it a little bit windy, for want of a better term, so a little bit looser, a little bit more open, thinking that, you know, they could put the magazine cover name at the top, and they could put all their teasers and stuff on there, you know, without cramping, the image up too much, and that's great. Sure enough, I did manage to sell it, but ironically, what did they do? They just zoomed straight in, cropped right in, really much tighter on the background. I mean, it still works, but I just thought I'd show it to you as an example of, we can think very carefully about all these things and how you know, how we photograph here, thinking if we're going to sell it to a magazine. Well, there's still magazines around. I heard, actually, John and I heard yesterday that practical photography might be closing in the not too distant future, potentially. So magazines are slowly disappearing. DCM is digital camera, still goes, thank goodness, because John and I both write for them. But you know, you can do whatever you like, but the designer on the magazine does not care. As long as he's got the space, he will do what he wants with your image. But the one thing I was going to say, and this is really, really important, is that if they're going to do that to your image and crop in quite dramatically on something like that, your focusing had better be pin sharp, and there had better be enough kind of depth in that image. Otherwise, it won't take that kind of enlargement, basically. So it's just something to remember when you are shooting. Okay, so that's the end of a little presentation of mainly your wonderful pictures of puffins. And I'm just going to stop share. There we go. And thank you for everybody who said it. If I have missed somebody out, I apologize. I don't think I have. Maybe I didn't show every picture that everybody sent. If there was a group, I'm not sure, but I tried to get as many in as I possibly could. So John, are you taking over the share?
Yeah, let me go on to the share.
So what are you doing, John? What are you doing?
Well, I wanted to, you sang about how important it is to get sharp shots, and I wanted to talk a bit about sharpening, and we'll stick with birds as a subject. And this is actually one of Andrew's shots, I think, from one of our bird of prey days. So do you want to identify the species, old chap?
Yeah, it's a puffin.
Yep, this is a puffin. This is a Skoma puffin, of the Atlantic variety.
The rhinoceros puffin, mate.
Yes, that's it. So
it's a great grey, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. But what we want to do is talk about sharpening. Now, when you this has already been converted in the RAW. I'm in Photoshop here, so the RAW has already been converted. I've done that bit, but I haven't added any sharpening in the RAW converter, because one of the issues with sharpening in RAW is that it's relatively indiscriminate. You have to sharpen the whole frame. Now, you can mask certain areas, but what that will mean is any sharp edges within the frame will be identified. So if you move your masking slider when in Lightroom or in Adobe Camera Raw, when you've added some sharpening and you get that kind of black and white screen that shows you the mask view, the more you move it over to the right, you start to see the sort of the halos, the sharpening halos around the areas that will be sharpened. But you can't really restrict them to any particular part of the image. Now, the difference between when you're using a camera is that you are actually focusing on a specific point in the frame. So in this shot, you know, it's going to be on the eyes or probably on the bridge of the beak. This kind of area here would be the sharp spot, and let the depth of field take the rest of the facial features in, and then we fall off to the background. What you don't want to do really is start sharpening across this entire area, because we don't want to sharpen stuff that's out of focus. It's out of focus for a reason. That was our creative decision when we took the shot. And we don't want to really sharpen areas that aren't particularly important, framing areas, this kind of thing. So the tree stump, we don't want to add loads of sharpening to that. And of course, if we apply that kind of liberal sharpening that you get in Camera Raw or in Lightroom, you're going to sharpen everything that's sharpenable according to the parameters you set. So instead of doing that, don't apply your sharpening there. If you want to isolate your sharpening area, just open it up into Photoshop and do it there instead. And this is how. So we want to be selective about where we sharpen. So I'm going to use one of the selection tools, and I'm just going to use this one here, the freehand lasso tool, which is nice and easy to use, very intuitive. And all I'm going to do is draw around the part that I want to be sharp. And that, generally speaking, is always going to be the area I focused on, or in this case, the area where Andrew focused. So this is what's important, this area here. That's the bit we want to have bitingly sharp, because that's going to be exactly where our viewer locks focus. When they look at the picture, that's where they're going to look. So the facial features are the parts we want to be sharp. I've made a selection now, but before I do anything, I want to soften the edge of that selection. And here's where feathering comes in. We've covered it before in some of the Zooms and also in some of the PhotoBuzz video tutorials. But to do it, the easiest way with this kind of situation is to use this button here, Select and Mask. Pops up in the Tool Options bar. Click on that, and then you can get a nice mask view. If you don't see it like that, it's just this view mode here. You
That's
can
a
have
crucial
various
picture,
different
John.
views.
Brilliant. Well done.
So we'll go for that. We'll go for the overlay view. That's the one I use. It's the one Andrew uses all the time. It gives you a very clean, very obvious break-off point for your edge of the selection you've made. So now to soften that edge, we're just going to move this feather slider, move it to the right, and you'll get a soft edge. And we can actually see the difference. We can see the break-off point. So on this one, I guess something like that, sort of 80, 100 pixels, that kind of area. So that looks nice and soft, because when I apply sharpening, I don't want there to be an obvious join between where I'm sharpening and the unsharpened area. So I want that to be nice and soft and gradual and subtle so we don't spot it. So we click OK. Now we've got that soft edge. And now what I'm going to do is punch this area I've selected into a new layer. Yep, layers were going to come up. I'm sorry about that. But don't be frightened about layers if you're not familiar with them. They're really, really easy if you just use them and get used to it. So we've got our background, we've got just one layer, just a standard layer, and we've now got a selection with a soft edge. To punch that selected area into its own layer, so it's in its own space, if you like, in the picture, all we've got to do is hit Control on a PC or Command on a Mac and the J key. So we do that, and we get layer 1 immediately appears. And what that layer 1 is, if I switch off the visibility icon, that's the bit we've just selected with the soft edge. So we've got this soft feathered edge and this selected area floating in its own space, independent now from the background. So we can do what we like to that bit using layers without impacting on the background. So we've got our sort of our fuzzy areas, our soft areas, all maintained in this background layer. And anything we do will only affect this area here, just this bit. So that's the bit we're going to sharpen. So this is just selective sharpening. When it comes to which sharpening technique you use, there's probably a few I use on a regular basis. And one is the high pass sharpening method, which is actually really easy to apply. And what's more, it's easy to check against your original image to see how it looks. To do high pass sharpening, first thing you want to do is make sure your active layer is the one where you've made your selection. So this is the bit we want to sharpen. Then just click where it says normal in the layers panel and go down to either overlay or soft light. One of those two is absolutely fine. I'll go for overlay, and you'll see it's quite an aggressive effect. If we switch it on and off, it's quite a beefy contrast. But we're not done yet. That isn't it. Because what we're now going to apply is the high pass filter. So we go up to filter, pop down to other, and it's hidden away in the other section, and it's called high pass. So we click on that, and we get this weird gray box come up. And what high pass does, it's a frequency filter that kind of identifies contrasty edges, just like sharpening does. So we can set the radius to decide how big those edges are going to be. Generally, you're going to be between 2 pixels and 8 pixels when you use high pass. Somewhere between those two will be good. How much you use depends on how much you want to sharpen and all the rest of it. But you can see a preview within the box there. If you see nothing going on, then you're not going to sharpen anything because you haven't got any detail. If you go too far, you again see nothing going on. There'll be no real difference happening. So what we need, about 2 to 8 pixels, somewhere on that scale. I'll go for about 3.5. There's some nice detail coming through. Then when I click OK, if I zoom in now, we can see the effect with the high pass on and off. Hopefully you can see this with the zoom transfer of the pixels. But there's our original. That's straight out the camera or straight out the raw converter. And then when we switch on the high pass sharpening, you see everything just kind of snaps into focus and gets a little bit more bold and dominant in the frame. Now, if that's too much, we've used overlay in this instance, you can just swap to soft light, and that gives a more subtle look. If you can, hopefully you can pick up the difference. You can just see that little bit of difference in contrast that's coming through. So overlay is quite good, or soft light is a more subtle effect. But if either of those you think it's still a bit too strong, you can just tone it down by using the opacity slider. Pull that down and you will dull down the effect until it's not there at all. So it's very adjustable and very easy to set up once you've got your area selected and that filter in place. Now, the other way, if I just, I'm just going to use the same selection again and use a different sharpening method. So I need to just basically duplicate what I've done. So I'm going to hold down the Control or Command key and just click on the thumbnail, and that selects my selection of what's active in this layer. Now I can go back to my background and just hit Control or Command and J again, and that gives me that area isolated just as we did at the beginning. I've just done a shortcut to get there. So we're now on layer 2. I've done nothing to it so far. We've ignored layer 1. That's with our high pass sharpening, so we can switch that off for the time being. Instead, I'm going to use unsharp mask. An unsharp mask, or USM, is kind of the daddy of all sharpening techniques. It's kind of what all sharpening is based on. It's actually an old film technique, but Photoshop emulates the technique really well. It's badly named because when it says unsharp mask, you kind of immediately think, well, this is going to soften it. It's not going to sharpen it. It's going to unsharpen it. But that isn't how it works. It actually uses blur to identify edges, and that's how it creates its sharpening effect. But let's look at what it does rather than what it's called. That's always the best policy with Photoshop. So we've got the layer active and selected, and we just go up to Filter. We go down to Sharpen, and there's all our sharpening options. They're all kind of based on this one here. This is the mothership of sharpening. So we click on Unsharp Mask, and we get this very old school dialog box. We can move stuff around to make sure we're on the bit we want to look at. There we go. We'll go on the eye there. And then we've got 3 sliders: amount, that's how much; radius, that's how big the edges are; and threshold, that's when it's going to kick in. Threshold is a bit like if you use the mask facility within Lightroom or Camera Raw for doing your sharpening. It's doing that same sort of thing. But because we've specifically selected the area we want to use by making that selection and putting it in a layer, we know that threshold needs to be at 0 because we want to sharpen everything in the area we've selected, because that's why we've selected that area, because we want to sharpen it. So threshold conveniently goes to 0. Radius has always got to be small when you're using unsharp mask. So leave that at a default of 1 pixel. Then all you have to worry about is the amount. And you can look at the preview. You can switch that on and off to see how it looks. And you can, the maximum you want to go to is about 150. That will give you quite a lot of sharpening. So as a rule of thumb, aim at sort of 100 to 120 or thereabouts, and then click OK, and you'll have sharpened your image with USM, unsharp mask, very, very quickly. If we zoom in, and we can switch that on and off as well, that's with the USM off. So we've switched it off now, and this is our original sort of out of Lightroom image. Then if we switch it on, you just see it snap into focus. And that's really all you need to worry about with sharpening. Be selective, choose the bit you want to be sharp, select it, feather it, don't worry about the rest of the area, and that gives you great looking images.
Brilliant.
So are there any questions on sharpening or selective sharpening techniques?
Silence rings out. Why would they, here's a question. I'll ask a question for the group. If they were obviously, would you sharpen first in Lightroom? Say they processed it in Lightroom. Would you sharpen it there and then bring it in and sharpen it more? Or would you not bother to sharpen it at all in Lightroom?
If you've got the default kind of 25%, it doesn't matter too much because it's not too strong. What you want to avoid is creating sharpening artifacts or kind of halos around edges. If you do that, every time you do anything else, any other imaging techniques you do, you're going to make it worse and worse and worse because you're starting with something that's kind of being corrupted, and you're going to make it more and more corrupt as time goes on. So really, sharpening is the last thing you should do in your imaging chain. It should be the last thing you do before you kind of print a file or save it out as your master file. So
you preempted my question.
That's good.
Yeah, feel free to all switch on now.
Do you want to stop screen sharing? I think we're literally on the hour, so that's a pretty good point to finish off, unless somebody has a burning sharpening question that they want to ask.
Got one, Andrew, as I always have. I would do exactly the same thing, and because I wasn't as confident in Photoshop as what I'm trying to get, I would just use a brush in a selective area over the face with a feather. And then
in Lightroom you're talking about?
Sorry, in Lightroom, yeah.
Right.
And possibly move the texture slider, which is less aggressive, I think.
Yeah. I mean,
for a similar effect.
Yes, and it may work really effectively to do that on specific images. But if you want to actually apply sharpening, then you'd need to use one of the sharpening tools, because
Yeah.
the texture isn't sharpening, it's actually artificially enhancing the appearance of detail, which is kind of what sharpening does as well by using contrast. But you would be fine to do that, but you wouldn't technically get a sharpening effect by using the texture slider. You may get something similar, but it would be different.
I mean, I think the thing that
If you use the mask in sharpening.
in Lightroom,
The
or
problem
in-
with the
Again, sorry, John.
Yeah, if you use the mask control, if you apply sharpening and then mask it, you're going to sharpen every edge, and you may not want to. So this technique in Photoshop, you're manually selecting which area you want to sharpen. If you sharpen
it's more targeted, I guess, is a good way of putting it, isn't it? You're picking on that one area rather than even because obviously if you're using in Lightroom and you're masking and you're selecting, you're still selecting the edges, but even though you are sort of targeting, you're still selecting all those edges or as many edges as you allow, but everything across. Whereas with what John's just shown you means that you can like on the owl shot. You can just pick the head if you want to go right. I only want to sharpen this little bit, and I want everything else to as it is. I mean, you won't need it all the time. It's an option basically.
Yeah. Okay.
I've just gone into screen share again. If just for a very quickly.
If people need to go, then obviously don't feel that you have to stay here. And if you've got tea to get or whatever. But yeah, if you want to stay, then we'll stay for a bit.
So what we've got here is Camera Raw. It's just catching up with itself. Come on, right, there we go. So if I crank up the sharpening in the detail tab of Camera Raw, this is the same as in Lightroom. They're the same controls exactly. So we've slapped on a load of sharpening, so that's going to be over sharpened at the moment. Then if I use the masking slider, I'm holding down the Alt key while I'm using it, and I can see the white areas are being sharpened, the black areas are being left alone. But we want the face, and you can see what's happening. Even if we increase masking really high, we're still picking out lots of areas that we didn't actually want to sharpen. We've got the tree stump, we've got the foliage, the feathers of the bird.
Yeah, no, I understand that bit, and I think, I like the idea of helping the area that is the impactable area, and I would use the feathered brush over the head, and then I would probably use the texture slider. Is there a sharpening slider in there?
There's a sharpening slider, but that's not the same as using sharpening and masking, because you can't really control it. You can just turn it up or turn it down.
It won't do such a good job, basically. But I mean, it'll probably.
Well, that's fine. That's what I like to hear. Is that there is a difference in Photoshop than using a Lightroom technique. So that's great.
I mean, the other thing, as I think John said, or if you didn't, I'll say no. You don't necessarily need to do this for every image. It's just finding the image that you where you want to do some selective sharpening on. It's just another, what we always try to do is give you some useful tools that you can go, a bit like John's action video put up last week. I know you looked at that. It's really useful. It's just, here's some stuff that you could use. You might not want to use it, but it's worth knowing about it. That's what we're trying to do all the time, to give you more things to play around with to improve your processing as you go. As simple as that.
It's great. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Cool.
Could I ask a question?
You can, Kim. Go for it.
Oh, thank you. Is it best in Adobe Camera Raw? Is it best to leave the sharpening slide or move the sharpening slider to 0, or to leave it just as it is automatically?
I haven't seen too much. Yeah, it gives you about 25% by default, and that doesn't really cause too much damage. You don't get sharpening artifacts when it's set to a low value like 25%. So you're actually perfectly safe to use it. Open stuff into Photoshop and then resharpen if it's only been at 25%. Technically, if you were going really precise, then you turn it off altogether and sharpen just in one area. You just sharpen in Photoshop at the end. But I've loads of times I've left it set by default, sometimes by mistake, and I haven't seen a huge difference. So it's not something worth worrying about.
And again, I think it's worth noting that you don't always have to have a rigorous sharpening. Quite often, I'll do literally no sharpening. You know, if your image is sharp enough, it's sharp enough. It's just, you know,
Yeah.
Every now and again, you might have an image that needs a bit of extra help, or you want to do, you know, you want to give it a little bit of an extra edge for a creative reason, whatever. So, you know, don't think that you have to go through this process with every single image, because you don't.
Yeah, going back sort of a decade or more, you used to have to sharpen because of the anti-alias filters on cameras. You've got a blurring filter over the sensor, and that's why you had to sharpen. And the idea was, well, we'll have to blur it so we don't get moire patterns. You know, if you're going to shoot detailed shots of ships' riggings, you might get moire appearing. But then we've discovered that actually that doesn't really happen very often. We don't need this thing blurring the image in the first place. Let's take it out the cameras. And of course, most cameras now don't have AA filters within them. So you don't need to worry too much about sharpening unless you need it for creative reasons, for that extra bite.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody else got a question, or should we call it a Zoom at that point? All gone quiet. Okay.
I was just going to say that now that's an area of Photoshop I have never, ever dipped a toe into. I can see just how much more useful that's very specific sharpening is in those very those areas where you just want something by itself rather than that generalized approach.
Yeah, it's really useful, Phil, on this precise kind of example where you want facial features really biting through, or if you're shooting landscapes in your foreground, you've got a really detailed foreground and you want it to really shine forward in the image. That's when you'd apply just that selected sharpening to that landscape foreground to get that detail in your rocks or whatever you've got as foreground interest. To get them to really punch through, you apply the sharpening there, but you don't want it going on your sky, you know, half a mile away. That isn't what you need.
I mean, to be honest, anything, you know, in terms of, there's a weird noise coming through. I don't know where that, I think it might be Basil falling off his sofa.
No, I'm not. No, I want to say something in a minute when I'm allowed. No.
Oh, right. You're rustling beautifully there, Basil.
I haven't moved.
Well, it's definitely a noise that's coming from you because it comes up on your thing frames. But anyway, what I was going to say was that, you know, in terms of you know, something John and I often have a discussion of what's advanced in terms of imaging or photography, and we don't think there's such a thing as advanced. There's just more layers of information, more layers of knowledge, etc., etc. But I think when it comes to but if there was an advanced photoshopping, if you like, or processing, I should probably say, I think it's when you start to get quite targeted about what you do. And again, it's not something that you necessarily are going to do with every image. If you're knocking out a batch of a load of images of the same thing for something, you know, you're going to do a kind of generic stuff. But, you know, the only time when I get a little bit more targeted is when I'm providing something for magazine work, if you like, where I know it's got to be right, like that cover. You know, I made sure that was perfect. Even, you probably noticed, even one of the bits of the grass that was coming out the back end of the beak, you know, I knew that they wouldn't want that because the way that was going to work. So I thought I didn't want to leave it to chance for them to sort that out. So I then cloned that out. So I made sure everything's perfect and made sure it was sharp, you know, all that stuff. So sometimes it is about targeting and being really precise with it. A lot of the time, I'm going to be doing, you know, if I can get out of, if I can process an image within 10 seconds, I'll do it if it's fine, if it's right, if it's something just to put on, you know, an Instagram or whatever, where it's so blinking tiny you can't tell the difference. But obviously if you want something, I can see Basil, if you want something a little bit more carefully done, then that's when you can use some of these techniques that we're showing you, these targeting techniques.
So much is about the end use, isn't it? What are you doing with the picture? As you say, if it's going up on screen, just on Facebook or whatever, probably doesn't matter too much. But if you're going to go big or print it and stick it on a 30 by 20 print on the mantelpiece, you want to make sure you've got that detail covered in the right places.
Exactly. And also, what are you printing it on? You know, you might want a little bit extra sharpening. I mean, I like to print on kind of a fine art, softer type paper. So often I sharpen a little bit harder than I would for anything else because I know it needs that little bit of extra edge because it's going to lose a little bit in the printing. So there's all these things that you have to take into account. Yeah.
Does noise pop up a little bit, John?
Say again, Barry?
Does noise pop up a little bit on using the sharp?
It shouldn't do. If it's there, it will sharpen the noise. If you've got some there, then this is one of the issues about doing it right at the end rather than at the beginning. So if you've got a noisy shot in the first place, if you shot at 6400 or higher or something like that, then all the sharpening, all that noise is going to have an edge, which sharpening will home in on. So if you've been quite lax with your settings and you haven't masked that stuff out, then you're going to sharpen every grain, in the noise. So that would be the main problem with that. But sharpening itself won't increase noise. It'll just reveal it if it's there.
Okay. Any other questions?
That was only all I
yes.
wanted. Yeah. Well, am I allowed or not?
You are. You go for it. We're waiting.
Yeah. Well, on the left-hand side, you've got a sharpening tool, haven't you?
In Photoshop.
In your icons, yeah.
Yeah.
Halfway down there's a sharpening tool. I use that quite often if I just want to sharpen the eye of a bird. Just
Okay.
click on that and just make it big enough, or just bring the beak out a bit more, or bring a leg out. That's all I sharpen. I don't sharpen anything else at all.
Right. Yeah.
I just use that one little bit of sharpening tool.
Yeah, it's not a particularly. I mean, you can be very precise in where you apply it. It's a bit. I use the blur tool, which is in the same group. I use that for sanding down edges if I'm doing a composite and I've got to, join two pictures together. The sharpen tool can be used that way because you can actually go in with a very small brush and sharpen a particular edge. But it's not particularly controllable is the only downside, and it's also a destructive tool. So that's the only sort of downside of that, is that you start painting into a layer. Your only way to get out of that is to backtrack by undoing it. So you don't want to go too far. Yeah. If you start painting too much and you go beyond your history states of undo, you might bugger your image that way, and there's no way back apart from starting over, which can be a bit frustrating.
Is that a technical term? You might
bugger your image. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Good stuff.
All right,
good stuff.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Okay, we're losing obviously people rapidly as people go and get stuff to eat. So we've got about 18 people left here. One last chance. Any other questions? We'll take one more if there are any. If not, we will call it a night.
A night.
Brilliant. Okay, good.
Don't call it alerts though.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Cheers,
I hope
everyone.
you enjoyed that. Thanks for the pictures, everybody. Good stuff. See you later. Bye. Bye, everyone. Good night. Bye.